For years, I had let the jokes land. I had let the smiles linger a second too long. I had allowed myself to be reduced to something small and harmless because it kept the peace, because it made gatherings easier, because I believed love didn't need to be loud to be real. That night proved how wrong I was. I watched faces shift as comprehension spread, watched respect arrive too late to matter, and felt something inside me finally settle. Not anger, not pride, just clarity. The kind that comes when you realize you've been carrying other people's comfort at the cost of your own dignity. Before I take you back to how it reached that table, I want to ask you something quietly and honestly. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to stand beside you, stay with me. Subscribe, not because it helps me, but because stories like this deserve witnesses. And if you've lived your own version of silence, leave it in the comments. Sometimes the first justice we get is being heard. For 3 years, I was the quiet husband at family gatherings. I learned early where I fit in the room, slightly off to the side, close enough to be included, far enough to be ignored. Emily's family filled every space with sound, voices overlapping, opinions delivered with confidence, laughter sharpened by competition. They measured worth the way some people measure square footage, visibly, loudly, and always in comparison to the next person. Her parents lived in a gated neighborhood outside Scottsdale, the kind of place where driveways curved for no reason other than status, and every car looked leased and temporary. Conversations there had a rhythm. Promotions, bonuses, market timing, who knew whom, who was doing well. They liked to ask about my work in public settings. Never privately, always with an audience. Brunches, birthday dinners, engagement parties where champagne flutes clinked and judgments were made before the food arrived. I told them the truth, carefully simplified. I said I ran a small logistics-related company. That was enough for them to stop listening. The word small did the work for me. Heads nodded. Smiles softened. Interest evaporated. Emily's cousin Mark, who introduced himself as being in investments no matter the occasion, found particular joy in it. He liked to joke about how refreshing it was that Emily married someone grounded, someone practical, someone realistic. The implication hung there, unchallenged. Her mother worried aloud about our future, framing it as concern. Her father suggested I look for something more scalable, as if ambition could be borrowed like a jacket. Emily never corrected them, not once. At first, I told myself it wasn't intentional. That silence didn't always mean agreement. But after enough dinners where the same jokes landed and the same assumptions went unchallenged, I understood what was happening. I wasn't being insulted. I was being quietly reduced. And every time I looked to my wife, every subtle pause, every opening where she could have spoken, she chose comfort over truth, changed the subject, smiled, let the moment pass. That was when I realized something important. I wasn't invisible because I lacked substance. I was invisible because it was convenient. The comment that changed everything came at a corporate charity dinner in Phoenix. It was one of those events designed to feel important without being meaningful. A rooftop venue with glass railings, heat lamps humming against the desert night, city lights stretched out below us like proof of success. Emily's family treated it like a showcase, an opportunity to be seen, to be recognized, to remind each other who mattered. I hadn't wanted to go. I rarely did. But Emily said it would look strange if I wasn't there, and I understood what she meant. Absence would invite questions. Presence allowed assumptions to continue uninterrupted. The table was long and carefully arranged. Name cards, polished silverware, wine already poured before anyone sat down. I took my place beside Emily and folded my napkin slowly, feeling the familiar sense of being on display without being included. The conversation drifted, as it always did, toward money. Not directly, never crudely. It arrived disguised as curiosity, as strategy, as advice. People spoke about exits and valuations, about timing the market and knowing when to cash out. I listened without participating, letting the sound wash over me like background noise. Then Mark leaned back in his chair. He held his wine glass the way some people hold microphones, confident, casual, fully expecting attention. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. He didn't look at me at first. He looked at the table. He suggested lightly that I should sell my business. Just like that. He said it would be smart, clean, responsible. He said I could take $1 million, disappear, reduce stress. He said Emily deserved stability, and that sometimes knowing your limits was a form of maturity. The table laughed softly, not cruelly, not sharply, comfortably. It was the kind of laughter that comes from shared assumptions, from people who believe they are agreeing on something obvious. I watched faces tilt toward me, waiting to see if I would play along, if I would accept the role they had written for me. I didn't respond right away. I looked at Emily. She lowered her eyes to her plate, adjusted her fork, focused on something that didn't require her to choose a side. Her silence was louder than anything Mark had said. In that moment, something settled inside me. Not anger, not hurt, just understanding. I saw the ledger clearly for the first time, saw how the story had already been written without my input. On paper, in their minds, I had already lost. And no one at that table, not even my wife, felt the need to correct it. After that dinner, the assumptions stopped pretending to be jokes. They hardened into concern, into planning, into conversations that no longer asked what I wanted, only what should be done about me. Emily's parents began calling her more frequently. I knew because she started repeating their questions as if they were her own, testing them in the air between us. She asked about retirement timelines, about contingencies, about what would happen if the business stalled or failed. The words sounded practical, but the tone carried something else. Doubt, dressed up as responsibility. Then the articles started arriving. Links forwarded to my phone about founders selling at the peak. Opinion pieces about burnout. Case studies about knowing when to step aside. She never framed them as pressure. She said she just wanted us to be informed, prepared, safe. She asked if my company had ever been properly valued. Not out of curiosity, out of concern. I noticed how the questions were never paired with interest. She didn't ask what I enjoyed about my work. She didn't ask who my clients were or why they trusted me or how I had built what I built. She asked about exit strategies and risk exposure, about safety nets she couldn't see. It wasn't about understanding anymore. It was about control. When I tried to explain, even in broad strokes, she accused me of being secretive, of shutting her out. She said it made her anxious not knowing everything. But she never once asked me to tell the story from the beginning. She wanted numbers without context, outcomes without process. And I realized something painful in that space between us. She didn't distrust the business. She distrusted me. By the time she moved out to think, taking only what she said she needed, I already understood the shape of what was ending. The house felt quieter, but not emptier. The tension that had lived in the walls left with her. Some endings don't arrive with shouting or slammed doors. Some arrive the moment you realize the person beside you has already started planning a life where you are optional. The first person who didn't underestimate me was my attorney. His name was Ryan Cole, and his office sat on a quiet floor of a downtown building that looked intentionally forgettable. No view, no statement furniture, just clean lines, muted light, and the kind of calm that comes from people who deal in facts instead of impressions. I slid the documents across his desk without ceremony. Operating agreements, contract summaries, a few carefully selected financial statements. Not everything, just enough. Ryan didn't raise his eyebrows. He didn't lean back or whistle or ask the question people always ask when they think they've misheard something. He adjusted his glasses, read slowly, and nodded once, as if this fit neatly into a category he already understood. When he finally looked up, his expression didn't change. "This will matter," he said quietly. "Not might, not could, will." He explained the process in measured terms. How divorce wasn't about emotion, but disclosure. How discovery had a way of stripping away narratives and replacing them with numbers that didn't care who told the better story at dinner parties. He warned me that once filings began, assumptions would collapse quickly. That the confidence Emily's family carried was built on incomplete information, and incomplete information never survived sworn statements. I listened without interruption. When he asked if I wanted to delay, to negotiate quietly, to soften the landing, I shook my head. "No," I said. "Proceed." For the first time in 3 years, I stopped protecting other people's misconceptions. Not out of spite, out of exhaustion. Silence had been convenient for them. It was time it stopped being convenient for me. The truth didn't explode. It didn't announce itself or demand attention. It arrived the way truth often does in real life. Quietly, through paperwork, line by line, without emotion. Discovery began, and with it came the slow dismantling of the story Emily's family had been telling themselves for years. Requests were made. Documents were exchanged. Statements were reviewed by people who didn't care about charm, tone, or intention. Only accuracy. The company was no longer described as logistics. That word disappeared the moment the contracts were examined. What I had built was compliance infrastructure, boring by design, invisible when it worked, indispensable when it didn't. Multi-state systems, regulatory frameworks, government-adjacent work that required silence more than publicity. The numbers spoke plainly. Annual revenue, 39 million. No press, no announcements, no victory lap, just math. Ryan called me late one afternoon. His voice was still even, but there was a new precision to it, the kind that comes when leverage shifts hands. Emily's legal team recalculated, he said. Overnight. The house, they learned, wasn't marital property. The company predated the marriage. The structures were clean. The boundaries clear. Everything they assumed was shared. Wasn't. The tone changed immediately. Emails softened. Language adjusted. Certainty gave way to caution. Requests that once sounded like demands were suddenly phrased as questions. The people who had spoken confidently about what Emily deserved now wanted to discuss resolution. Containment replaced confidence. I didn't explain anything. I didn't offer context or history or justification. I didn't correct past misunderstandings or fill in the blanks they had ignored. I just waited. There is a strange calm that comes when you no longer need to be understood. When the truth stands on its own and your role is simply not to interfere with it. For the first time since my marriage began unraveling, I slept without rehearsing conversations that would never happen. The truth was doing the work for me. A year later, it happened by accident. I was in New York for a supplier meeting, the kind that lasts longer than it needs to and ends with dinner because everyone is too tired to pretend they aren't hungry. The restaurant sat just off Madison Avenue, quiet, expensive, built for conversations that assume privacy. I had no reason to be careful anymore. No reason to downplay anything. When my client asked what I did, I answered plainly. I used the full name of the company. I didn't soften it. I didn't summarize. The name landed. I noticed the shift before I understood it. A pause at a nearby table. A head turning slightly. Then another. 3 tables over, I recognized them. Emily's parents. Mark. A few people I didn't know but could immediately place. Same posture, same confidence, same expectation of being important. They hadn't seen me yet. They were mid-conversation, leaning in, performing familiarity. Then someone at their table reacted. Recognition does something strange to a room. It doesn't announce itself. It tightens. Mark's laughter stopped too abruptly. He dropped his eyes to his phone, scrolling with a focus that didn't match the screen. Emily's mother straightened, recalculating. Her expression flickering through possibilities that all arrived too late. I didn't look over. I didn't acknowledge them. I didn't need to. I finished my sentence. The numbers followed. Context filled the air naturally, the way it always does when no one is trying to manage perception. The silence behind me was complete. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I didn't correct anything. For the first time, I wasn't being discussed. I was being recognized. And recognition, I learned that night, feels very different when it arrives without your consent. Emily called me that night. Not immediately. She waited until the hour when the city softened, when noise fell away and truth had more room to breathe. Her name lit up my phone, familiar and distant at the same time. She said she finally understood. She said things made sense now. The quiet, the boundaries, the way I had never defended myself. She said no one had told her, that she had been filling in blanks with the only voices willing to speak loudly. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I told her something simple. I told her she had never asked. There was a pause on the line. Not dramatic, just real. The sound of someone sitting with a realization they couldn't reframe fast enough. I didn't feel victorious. That surprised me. What I felt was finished. Finished carrying silence that wasn't mine. Finished shrinking to make other people comfortable. Finished believing that dignity required permission. Some people only respect success once it becomes undeniable. They don't notice discipline, patience, or restraint. They notice results, and only when those results enter the room without asking. By the time they see it clearly, access is already gone. That realization didn't arrive loudly. It didn't need to. It settled in the way permanent things do, quiet, irreversible, and complete. And in the end, that quiet justice was worth every year they laughed.